Retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton, who joins us now, president of Cedric Leighton Associates. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Colonel, thanks so much for being with us. Let's talk about the strategic importance of Egypt. Access to the Suez Canal. It is, I think it's absolutely critical for the U.S. military missions in the Middle East, not to mention the 2,000 some odd military aircraft that fly through Egyptian airspace every year. Is that reason alone for the United States to maintain financial aid to Egypt and to do what it can to preserve the long-standing strategic partnership?
It is a large part of the equation. And, Greg, when you look at the way in which Egypt is situated and you see not only, where it's located on the map in northeastern Africa, but also how its close proximity to the Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, you have a real need from a logistical standpoint to use Egypt as a transit point. If Egypt were to fall away from being a transit point, you would have a situation where it would be exceedingly difficult for the United States to help any of its either forces that are stationed in those areas or to provide support to other governments in the region. So it becomes incredibly tenuous at best from a logistical standpoint if that were to be cut off. And it is a very key element for us to keep our presence there and to keep our overflight rights there. Very, very important from a strategic perspective.
Yeah. And it's not just the military, and obviously if the Suez were to be threatened or closed down, it would drive up our military costs. But for consumers in the United States, yes, it's true that Egypt doesn't itself produce a lot of oil, but the Suez Canal is the method through which a lot of the world's oil flows to get where it needs to go. So that would drive up the price of oil and gasoline in America and elsewhere into the stratosphere.
It would, and in fact, you're already seeing some movement in the oil price to the upside, and you have Thursday's close, I think, was $111 a barrel, which is up quite a bit from just a few weeks ago. And that kind of unrest that you're seeing in Egypt now, and especially, since Egypt is so strategically located with the Suez Canal there, that makes a huge difference. Plus, you couple that with the unrest in Syria, you couple it with potential unrest in the Gulf Arab states, even Saudi Arabia. That becomes a key driving force from an economic standpoint. And when people talk about these strategic moves being all about oil in the Middle East, they are partially correct because, quite frankly, we have not quite achieved energy independence. We still import about 28% of our oil from the Middle East. A lot of that does go through the Suez Canal. And because of that, it becomes exceedingly important for us to maintain our relationships with Egypt, even if we don't particularly care for the people that are in power in Egypt at this time.
Speaking of power, once they were elected to power, Mohammed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood then went about systematically dismantling democracy, and they began to consolidate their power and imposing their version of strict Islamic law. Was it therefore naive or foolish or just a mistake for President Obama from the beginning to side with the Islamists?
I think it was very, I understand what he was trying to do in the sense that if you work with the Islamists, perhaps they will be less virulent against the United States. The problem with that approach is that attitude to the United States, the virulent nature of their ideology, is not going to go away just because you make nice with them. It is not going to go away even if you support them financially. They are antithetically opposed to our way of life. They are opposed to our military presence. They're opposed to our relationship with Israel. And because of that, they see us as an impediment not only to their assumption of power, but also to their designs for the greater Middle East. And whether or not the relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda is a solid one, and in my view it is not a solid one, there are still designs by the Muslim Brotherhood to co-opt a lot of the regimes that have been friendly to the United States in all kinds of Arab nations. And once those regimes are co-opted or are taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood or allied groups, you're going to have a huge problem on our hands from a strategic perspective, and the logistical issues that we would be confronting with Egypt and the Suez Canal will pale in comparison comparison to the issues that we'd be confronting if Muslim Brotherhood-friendly governments took over in many of the other countries in the Middle East.
All right. Colonel Cedric Leighton, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate your insight.
My pleasure, Greg. Thanks for having me.